we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time watching, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, if you ever want to reach out to the podcast, let us know if you want to hear about a new topic. If you want to come and join the podcast here as a guest, reach out, hit us up, let us know what you think and what you want to do. And again, like I've said this before, most of the guests I've had on the podcast have been people reaching out. Looking forward to getting some new people on and new digs and new everything. So again, thank you all so much for watching and supporting and being here, whether you're listening or watching on YouTube. If you do want to support a little bit further, hit us up through the subscription side of things. Just like and subscribe to the videos. Follow along wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching, and you can catch the next episode whenever it comes out. We love having you here, and again, it's the best thing for us is you watching and joining along and engaging and hitting us up in the comments and all that stuff. That's the best thing you can do. But if you did want to go past over and above, hit us up on our Patreon, patreon.com/BigmarkPod. There's a few different areas and different levels, I should say, and different ways you can support. So again, thank you all for being here. Super excited to talk about today's episode because it's an exciting one as always, because the boys are in the playoffs, the boys are in the finals, the final series of the NLL championship are the Toronto Rock and Toronto Rock lacrosse team. They're in the National Lacrosse League, box lacrosse, and they are Toronto. They're technically Toronto, even though they play in Hamilton. And like all Toronto sports fans, they love pain. Leafs pain, Jays heartbreak, Raptors rebuild, but quietly in the corner of the city's sports history, there was a team that just won. And again, the Toronto Rock, they are Toronto's box lacrosse powerhouse. And they're actually one of the most successful franchises in the National Lacrosse League history. And again, they're kind of one of these teams where not everyone, I should say, but if you mention the Toronto Rock, it's not necessarily like no one's ever heard of them. You kind of see them, but they somehow feel both legendary and underrated. Super interesting. So again, that's one of these things where, you know, when it's not one of the big four, you know, basketball or NBA, Major League Baseball, National Hockey League, NFL, if it's not one of those, usually it's not necessarily on everyone's radar. I mean, there are some people who haven't heard of some of those pro sports, but they just have no idea about any sport. But if you're interested in sports a little bit, you've definitely fucking heard at least of those leagues. But again, if your school didn't have lacrosse, like my school didn't have lacrosse growing up, I knew lacrosse through like my neighbors, my buddies I went to elementary school with. They were big into lacrosse here in Hamilton. The Hamilton Bengals is like the kind of grassroots rep program here in Hamilton, and they always encouraged me to come and play. I kind of wish I did. I wish I kind of tried it out at least. But this would have been like late 90s, early 2000s. I would have been trying this shit out, and it would have been like I was a big kid even back then, and when I either had a target on my back and had to get fucking infinitely tougher, or started to fight, and then who knows what kind of trajectory that would go on, you know, with more childhood head trauma or whatever the fuck. I mean, like I wasn't a boxer, but I played basketball, and you fucking tussle around a bit and fucking take charges and shit, but and I didn't start playing football until I was like in grade 8. But like some of these kids out there, they're playing sports really young where you can get like head injuries, and who knows what that does to a developing brain. I mean, maybe it's good because they're still developing and still growing, and it can repair a little bit of those injury, but who knows? Again, it's kind of one of these things where, you know, it's an interesting. The Toronto Rock are an interesting team because they basically, you know, they're a team that's won like the Yankees, but they've been covered like a community bulletin. And, you know, it's still one of the best dynasties Toronto has ever seen. And again, they're more than just a lacrosse team, but like every sports team, they kind of take on their fan base, and they represent the weird, tough, blue collar and underappreciated side of all sports, not only just Toronto sports, but again, them playing out of Hamilton, they've had a big following out of Hamilton, and it's kind of funny. The franchise actually started in Hamilton, but we'll get to that later. Like I said before, I kind of mentioned box lacrosse, and if you are just a casual fan or you don't actually know, box lacrosse is indoor lacrosse. So lacrosse is Canada's actual national sport. It's not hockey, even though everyone thinks it is. Lacrosse is our national sport, and it was, invented by the indigenous people of North America, and again, mostly played outside. But box lacrosse is indoor and is played in hockey style arenas with just like, basically looks like they just fucking roll out carpet on the fucking thing. Like, I think I've seen some lacrosse played on basically like just like cement, like they just like melted the ice at the arena and the boys are out there. So it's really interesting. Again, it's like kind of it's super fast and physical, extremely violent, but it's creative because it's kind of like hockey with basketball spacing. And again, it's just like pretty controlled chaos. Like, guys are flying around, but very much like, because it's 5-on-5. There's a goalie, obviously, but there's 5-on-5. No one has a long pole. So in field lacrosse, the defensemen have a pole that's like 6 feet long. And there's like, I think 11 guys or something on the field. There's mad guys, 10 guys maybe. Anyway, there's mad guys in lacrosse versus indoors 5-on-5. So again, very much like basketball. You see like the same defensive schemes, like zone defenses and box and one and like just different approaches. And again, you think you can kind of set screens, but you can fucking dummy. Like, it's, again, I probably felt like I would have done really well knowing the game of basketball would have translated really well to lacrosse, sounds like. And instead of setting a screen, like in basketball, when you set a screen, you're supposed to be like super stiff. You can't actually like really give the guy you can't like push off at all. And in lacrosse, obviously you could fucking hammer a guy. So would be fun. Again, obviously, it's very much like if you want to look at the difference, kind of like field lacrosse is chess on grass, but box lacrosse is chess in a phone booth where somebody keeps cross-checking your ribs. So again, it's so much more compressed, and they're fucking slinging this ball that's like a pound of like rubber. The goalie wears like every pad in the books. He's got like back catcher pads on. He's got football pads, goalie pads. It's fucking trippy, but he's got like a different twig. His stick is like big and versus a regular cross stick. I guess hard to explain. It's a stick with a net. Like, it looks like like you're going to catch fucking butterflies, like a little thing, but it's like obviously ergonomically shaped. But it comes from like the original design was like one singular bent piece of wood, and then like leather straps to make like a little net, and then you can kind of cradle the ball in there and throw it like that. So, and like in the indigenous tradition, you were like given your lacrosse stick at like when you were a child, and it was like man size. You had to learn how to play with it even when you were like a little kid. And then you were buried with your lacrosse stick. Like, it was very, like, I'm sure they fucking broke their sticks at some point. Like, I don't know. I doubt that they were completely impervious to breaking if they played to the intensity that you play today anyway. So it's kind of interesting, right? Like, Ontario, especially Southern Ontario, is a major pipeline for lacrosse and professional lacrosse, and I think it totally made sense to have a team in the area. And like I said, it did start in Hamilton. They started as the Ontario Raiders in 1998, played at Copps Coliseum, and they were the first Canadian based franchise in the NLL. And the NLL, the National Lacrosse League, was actually I was just about to see here, when did it start? So, sorry, I'm just looking it up here. The National Lacrosse League was founded in 1986, so it's been around for 40 years now. And again, the Ontario Raiders in Hamilton started in 1998, so it was well into the league. You know, the league had been around for more than 10 years at that point, and again, it was kind of really interesting here, just looking up some of the history here, and just seeing that again that's how long the league was around and how important lacrosse was in Canada, and it still took that long for them to actually get established. Obviously, the Raiders were not yet the dynasty that they became. They were the idea was there, but not necessarily the identity. And of course, it's a new league, new market. There's all these other teams in the kind of the great the Great Lakes states, and then there's one in San Diego. I don't know when that actually became, but anyway, lacrosse was still trying to break into pro sports consciousness. It wasn't necessarily always on the line. The Raiders were like the demo tape before the album dropped, right? Rough around the edges, but you could hear the hit coming. So the team eventually moves from Hamilton to Toronto in 1999. The next year, basically, they move. They rebrand as the Toronto Rock, and again, it kind of reflects Toronto's music and entertainment identity. And the early ownership included major sports names like Bill Waters and Paul Beeston, Ty Domi, and Bobby Orr. And it was wild that it had that kind of Maple Leafs connection and the Blue Jays connection, and of course hockey royalty with Bobby and now Ty. Now they played at a Maple Leaf Gardens, a historical building, and it was perfect for that kind of old school combat sports vibe. It would have been really interesting seeing some of those early games. And, they didn't just move into Toronto. They moved into a cathedral, Maple Leaf Gardens. Ghosts in the Rafters, Conn Smythe energy. And then lacrosse shows up and starts throwing elbows. After its first year in Toronto, the Toronto Rock actually won the 1999 NLL championship. And I don't know how it works. Usually with expansion teams, they don't always get necessarily the best guys. Sometimes they'll get better draft picks in the draft and things like that. But in CFL history, at least, you were allowed to when the the Ottawa Red Blacks came back into fashion. I guess they were the Rough Riders at the time. I can't remember what they started as. Anyway, they were allowed to take the best player from every team if they wanted, or any player they wanted from every team, and the team had to put like a retainer basically and like pay or something, or do something to like make sure you didn't take their best player. And eventually they took Hamilton's quarterback. I guess we couldn't afford to cap him, whatever the fucking shit was. But anyway, they took our best quarterback and Henry Burris, and then our center had to retire and all the shit. Anyway. So I'm not sure how that went, but they ended up winning the 1990. So I don't know if the Toronto Rock all of a sudden got all these great players. Regardless, their second year in existence, they win the NLL championship, and basically the rebrand, relocation, new city, and an immediate title. 2000, they win again, back-to-back champions. Caleb Toss scores the famous last-second goal against Rochester to win the championship. Actually, a cousin of mine used to play for Rochester. Hilarious. Basically, again, instant franchise mythology, winning the game on 1 second on the shot, winning the championship game with 1 second left, and that's not just a goal, that's a movie scene. That kind of that's the kind of thing your uncle brings up at every family barbecue for the next 25 years. If they're lacrosse fans, they're gonna be talking about that forever, right? Obviously, that kind of started the birth of the rivalry with Rochester and Buffalo and Philly. And the Rock instantly became the team everyone had to deal with. So the championships were as follows: 1999, 2000, 2002, 2003, and 2005. So that's 5 titles in 7 seasons. Basically their key identity, basically what made the Rock was tough defense, elite goaltending, and smart veteran leadership. And that Ontario lacrosse IQ. Like I said, lots of players grew up in the area and were happy to play for Toronto and the only Canadian team. So they were pretty stacked, I'm sure, for guys that wanted to go there. Maybe took less money to come and play in Toronto. Who knows, right? Bob Whipper Watson, Colin Doyle, Jim Veltman, and Coach Les Bartley as the architect behind the bench. We're obviously all major contributors, especially Bob Watson. He's the goalie. Was, like I said, it was elite goaltending, and he was that franchise backbone, calm, tough, dependable, and the kind of player who becomes part of the building. Colin Doyle was obviously an offensive star, big game player. He showed up when it was important, when everyone needed him, and he was the face of the franchise for many years, for many fans. And then Jim Veltman, of course, he was the loose ball machine, the leader, and the dirty work guy. And it's like every dynasty needs three things: the scorer, the wall, and the guy doing the stuff that doesn't show up on SportsCenter. The Rock had all three. Now, why didn't this team really become bigger is the biggest question, What is it about lacrosse that doesn't really grab people? Like, is it because we can't really deal with more than 4 of these major sports? Maybe that's it, because there are so many other sports that are really fun to watch. But is it just like people are like, I fucking can't deal with another league, bro? Like, I'm already gambling on 4. Or like, I can't do this. I'm already doing soccer now too, bro. I was 5. So I don't know. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's just like, so is it attention span? Is it coverage? Yes. And all the money goes to those 4. Yeah. But there's, people will watch what they want to watch. It's a lot easier to at least film these shits and fucking, it doesn't have to be in beautiful stadiums. You can just at least fucking put, and I know that exists. And I know that there's streams out there and shit of wild sports. Like when I was in Thailand, I saw some fucking sport where it's like volleyball, but you're like fucking kicking your feet. It's fucking trippy. But I'm sure there's someone filming that, right? But anyway, super interesting why The Rock and lacrosse didn't become bigger. And like I said, is it a contrast with the other Toronto teams? Obviously, the Leafs always seem to dominate attention. The Raptors were growing at the time. They were pretty young as well, as they're only 10 years old in 2005. And the Blue Jays obviously have their winning history too. Even the Argos themselves are one of the winningest teams in the CFL. So it's one of these things where it's like, man, they had a lot to contend with. They were winning. The Rock were winning, but still fighting for oxygen. Now, the NLL had less mainstream coverage, of course, like I mentioned. Lacrosse, it didn't have huge pockets, but they did have some people, but not everywhere. And Toronto media can be brutal if you're not hockey, basketball, or baseball. So the media probably didn't help, right? And the Rock were raising banners while half the city was arguing about the Leafs' third defense pairing, right? So it's a different thing, right? Like, other things just kind of take up the consciousness. And I mean, I guess the seasons coincide, and like this, hockey finals are on right now, and so are lacrosse finals, right? As we speak, as the Rock are playing, so May 15th it'll be, the Rock are playing in the series final. They're back in it. So, again, they're still at it, but Toronto's always had a kind of weird sports identity, right? They claim winners after the fact, and they ignore great stories until they become nostalgia. And the Rock kind of became a cult classic instead of a mainstream monster. Now, jump to 2011, the Rock win their 6th NLL championship. I believe I was actually at that game, because in 2011 I just started university, and my buddy Benny and his buddy Caleb, who actually played lacrosse at St. FX, were down to go. So we all met in Toronto. That was super fun. And again, it just proved the franchise was not just an early 2000s flash. It reconnected the modern era to the dynasty era. And Bob Watson winning another title before he retired was definitely a storybook ending. And that 2011 title feels like the final scene where the old gunslinger kind of comes back for one more duel, wins, and rides off into the crowd, chanting his name. Tremendous. 6 titles, one of the league's benchmark franchises, and a team with banners that many Toronto fans still don't talk about enough. Now in 2001, they actually moved back to Hamilton. The Rock announced their home games were moving from Scotiabank Arena back to Hamilton. They kept the Toronto Rock name, but it was always interesting, right? Like them still being called Toronto, even though they played out of Hamilton, and but their original franchise roots were in Hamilton, so it was a little bit awkward. But again, the business and logistics made sense. Better arena availability. You're not dealing with fucking Leafs and the Raptors and shit. Goddamn. More control over dates. Strong lacrosse region too. Hamilton, like I said, with we're close proximity to Six Nations, which is an indigenous reserve close to Hamilton. So there's really strong lacrosse there. Actually, the Burlington lacrosse team is called the Chiefs. So every time they go out there, they don't have not such a nice reception. Let's just put it that way. I'm not talking about their cell phones. But again, the fan emotion, Toronto fans kind of lost that easy access. And again, that name location mismatch just kind of felt strange. It's like your buddy who says he lives in Toronto but actually means Burlington. Technically connected, spiritually complicated. So it's interesting, the franchise, like I said, started in Hamilton, which is super cool, went to Toronto, became a dynasty, and then came back to Hamilton while still carrying that identity. So it is weird. It is kind of weird. But, you support the boys. So like I said, the modern rock, and shall we call it the 2026 revival, because as I mentioned, they are in the final. They're back against Halifax this year. It's their first appearance since 2015. And again, it's this new generation has this opportunity to discover the team. Old fans reconnecting with the dynasty history. Toronto Hamilton fans are getting a major spotlight, and it's super cool. Hamilton is happening. It's kind of cool to tie the two together. I mean, Toronto doesn't really want to have anything to do with this. We don't really necessarily want to have necessarily want to have anything either. So again, it's super interesting that way. And it's kind of one of those things where, sorry here. It's kind of one of those things where, we want to gain more attention. The Junos were in Hamilton, all this great stuff, but all of a sudden, we still have this tie. So we'll say what you will. I don't know. I don't want to go into it. Let's just leave it at that. The Rock are not just doing nostalgia anymore. They're back in the conversation. The old dynasty has a new chapter. It's super cool. The NLL is growing. Canadian matchup definitely adds juice with Hamilton and Halifax. The H boys getting after it. And the cross deserves more attention in Canada's sports media landscape. So it's really interesting to see some of this go on, see the Toronto sports league and scene come to Hamilton, and we become so strangely intertwined with that. And yes, we're close, and with World Cup happening and all these different things, it all feels so close. The Pan Am games were all here, so really interesting, really cool opportunity for the boys this weekend. Again, it's a series, so we'll see how they do. But good luck to the fucking Rock, boys. Love y'all. Thanks for watching. Go Rock, go. Peace.